our first discussant, Ms. Maisa. So will generative AI art follow suit as the next legitimate art form? So if so, so similar to the track of the photography, di ba? Before it was controversial to the art domain. So now it's an acceptable, legitimate art form. So if so, should the generative AI be considered as something in its own lane, or should it replace the current techniques since it is easier and more accessible? Let's hear from Maisa.
Is introduced, controversies would usually follow. Essentially, when photography first came out, it was merely seen as a way to record or frame aspects of reality. I think over the years, as people learn to play with the possibilities of photography, we have gradually formed realizations about how it could be both a creative form and approach to create, recreate, and render new ways of seeing and engaging art. This realization has a lot to do with the creative processes involved in producing photographs, specifically with the human intervention involved in framing the photographic scene, processing the photos, either in traditional or digital darkrooms, and curating them afterwards. I think it's quite possible for generative AI art to be artfully legitimized, so to speak, provided ethical and legal issues concerning its process and production are resolved. Recalling the many art historical movements, there is actually an art movement called generative art. It was coined in 1965 by German philosopher Max Benz. The term generative art describes works based on mathematical formula or an algorithmic code. The idea behind the conceptual precepts of generative models could actually be traced back to those held by classical philosophers who made their mark in the quest for describing the process of human thinking as a symbolic system. The Tate Gallery explains that generative art is art made using a predetermined system that often includes an element of chance and is usually applied to computer-based art. It is usually associated with process art, where the process involved in creating the artwork is deemed crucial and indispensable to the value of the completed work. The process is defined by the artist, and the output results from a collaboration between the machine and the artist. And this collaborative venture promises quite an exciting world of possibilities. Each art form and technique developed over the years can be considered distinctive. At the same time, they could be playfully integrated or mashed up to complement and supplement each other in creating, arguably, new art processes and artworks. It's not so much an issue about newer art processes replacing old ones or having newer art styles and techniques standing alone. The concern is more about how they could generate a timely or relevant understanding of art or what art is today, and the many ways they could be engaged to express the diverse and distinctive experiences of people in our increasingly interconnected world. Traditional artistic concepts and practices do not truly become extinct. They simply evolve, changing as people change. Art, after all, essentially draws from life, with all its complexes and nuances.
Yung explanation is a bit profound, no? But basically, to my understanding, yung generative art is not necessarily new in today's generation. She mentioned, I believe, about before meron ng movement on using yung mathematical formula and codes to generate arts. And then according to Maisa as well, it's yung art itself. Sorry for if not exact yung yung explain or yung paraphrasing. It's actually the process of expressing. It's not really an issue if you have new processes, because it's about experience of people and then how to express yung certain experience. So to continue, if you have questions, by the way, I could send to Maisa. She will be happy to answer those questions offline, of course. Yung next question is, this one is for Doc Rachel. So how could ChatGPT and other AI tools be used to automate certain tasks? So this one is related also, as mentioned by Doc Rachel, that there's a possibility of generating fake news or or yung mga incorrect information or disinformation. So is there a possibility to use or ChatGPT and other AI tools to automate certain tasks such as fact-checking or transcription, not necessarily yung fact-checking, the transcription during the interviews, generating interview questions, for example. So how could these technologies be used to automate this, well, as mentioned, mechanical tasks? Can you give us some ideas, Doc Rachel?
Actually, in terms of for fact checking, we're using non-generative AI to monitor suspicious websites and Facebook accounts that normally come out with disinformation. So again, AI is not new. We've been using it since we started check.ph in 2019. In terms of monitoring, then in the 2022 we used AI, the check platform of Midan, to generate answers. So for example, we have a pre-existing fact check. And then one in our Facebook messengers for check.page, somebody asks about whether, ask us whether this particular news is fake or not. If we had already done a fact check on it, then our AI would immediately just give her the link to a previous fact check. So instead of having our curators go through one by one the questions, so that that program or that AI allowed us to focus on claims or questions that had not been fact checked, because the AI just, gave the answers for the ones that had already been or is already in our files as a fact check information.
But these are not generative AI, right?
These are non-generative, yes.
Okay.
Because non-generative means that they can link, they can connect, they can basically produce a database.
Okay. Agree.
So as against the generative means, precisely generative means creative. It can create. It can put ideas together. Rather than talk about chat, instead of, you don't need to go to ChatGPT anymore or OpenAI to access it. If you have a subscription on Bing, Microsoft has already integrated ChatGPT 3 on their Bing. And Microsoft is working on integrating ChatGPT 4 into the Microsoft 360. Once they launch this, there will be such massive change in the way we work. Now, so for example, when ChatGPT 4 comes out commercially, you can use it in Microsoft Teams. What I understand is it can transcribe your Teams meeting for you, so you don't have any problems sa minutes nila. So instead of you're taking down the minutes, it can actually do the minutes for you, or take down transcribe the meeting for you. In a further model, they're thinking that not only can it transcribe, it can highlight what was discussed in the meeting. So if you miss the first part of the meeting, you can jump into the meeting and ask the chat that's linked to your Microsoft Teams, what are they discussing now? And it can give you a summary at what had already been discussed. So there will be many uses that are perfectly legit and will make life easier if we know how to use it. Right now we're using, I'm sure if many are teachers in the audience, we're using Grammarly, right? For example, when you're writing your journal articles, it's always good to have an AI double check your grammar, because no matter how good the writer you are, you do miss some things. Grammarly also has another, like, it can also do plagiarism check. You can use Turnitin, which is another, Turnitin is another
AI tool.
AI tool to check, if your students are plagiarizing their work. So there are many uses that we're actually already using AI without realizing, or maybe that we're on AI, because
Mhm.
the term AI can be scary and we think that it's going to take over our jobs, but actually, yeah, we're actually already, introducing it into our lives ever since that you remember Microsoft Word had this little stapler with eyes, little no paper clip with the eyes back in the 80s ba yun? Early 90s. That was already the beginning of AI development.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. So discussing further on this one, no? So the impact on the industry. So how might AI, or specifically ChatGPT, affect the role of human writers in the publishing industry, and what skills or areas of expertise will be most important for writers to focus on as AI technology continues to develop? As you mentioned, that it might be, for some, it might be scary about discussing about AI replacing them. So, what skills or areas kaya of expertise will be most important for writers to focus on?
I guess it's still the the creation of content and
Okay.
knowledge. No, because if you're a reporter, let's say, who only knows how to write in 5 W's in H inverted pyramid,
Mhm.
yes, you will be replaced by AI. But if you're an enterprising reporter who goes after the source, knows how to analyze the data in front of you and make a story of it, no,
Mhm.
then you will not, this is not threatening. In fact, you can do more in-depth stories with AI.
Mhm.
Data journalism, for example, would
Mhm.
not be possible without AI. The big picture will not be possible without AI. So there are many new fields and even stories that can be written because of AI. So
Mhm.
it's not really a threat, but rather a new tool that
Mhm.
can enhance our industry.
Yeah, so it could enhance yung industry of journalism. I agree, Prof. Rachel. So going back to arts, so we have question about creative work. So generative AI art has been used to replace creative work such as business logos, social media marketing, poster, etc. So is this acceptable to some of the artists? So let's hear from Maisa. Let me check. Oops, sorry for that.
Whenever Presently, we see AI-generated images being used in pop album covers, magazine spreads, illustrations for articles, or exhibited in traditional gallery spaces, or even used in creating motion picture and animation in collaboration with other artists. An advantage of being able to generate your own designs with AI generators is that they are mostly free to use. This is also why some people consider generative models as a democratizing tool and strategy, as it allows a larger public greater access to producing artworks originally conceived as a distinctive or unique creative practice. AI-generated artwork can be produced in mere moments, in minutes or seconds even, and the results are typically rendered with visual accuracy. Users could simply enter a prompt, and the AI generator delivers images as instructed. The clearer and more creative and more detailed the prompt, the more precise and interesting the results. This could potentially undermine a thriving area of commercial art, as AI-generated artworks could be produced faster, at less cost, with greater efficiency, and without the sometimes complicated client-artist negotiations involved. This situation may prove unpalatable and unacceptable for most commercial artists. A significant number of commercial artists could stand to lose work opportunities as a result of this. This situation presents a challenge as well as a creative opportunity for artists to either make changes in their artistic approach or find other lucrative alternatives to producing commercial art.
Okay, so for Maisa, I think I believe for her it's democratizing because it allows others to use it. and then rendering with visual accuracy, etc., etc. So despite the risk and challenges that mentioned a while ago in our discussion in journalism and perhaps in general, so there's a potential for fake news generation. There's a potential for those people well with mechanical task. So what do you see as the potential benefits? But I think this one is unknown. So what do you see to highlight Prof. Rachel, what do you see as the potential benefits of using ChatGPT in journalism? Just to highlight, how could it enhance the quality or efficiency of the reporters in reporting news?
Well, right now, perhaps I would yun nga, to if it's just writing basic, 5 doubles and H stories, it can be used, or to generate ideas, for example, for a feature story. You know, usually it's very helpful when you have a writer's block and you're writing
Mhm.
a feature or an essay, then you can use it to generate the story. But for it to be really, I think, valuable, is you already have to have that prior knowledge of what you are looking for. Because if you are, basically asking it for an answer, and without,
Yeah.
knowing whether it's going to turn out the correct one, then you could actually be fooled by it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then for example, in studying, no, it can, you're looking for, let's say, definitions of media theories and all of that. Then since there's a lot of that material on the web, it can do a summary for you. No, it can generate, for example, what are the critical media theories. It can generate a list for you and even a summary of what each theory is about. So even for teachers, it can, shorten the work in terms of giving you a guide, and then you can develop it on your own from there. So, yeah, instead of, starting from scratch and looking for the information, each one, looking through books or Googling, each topic, it can
Mhm. Mhm.
generate summaries using
Mhm.
chat.
Actually, you also, I think you explained this clearly. If we could consider Chat GPT generated news, opinion, and feature articles as acceptable because in a story written by Jerry Davich of Northwest India Times. So he wrote. So he was asked by his editor to come up with a column about the debate about obesity being a disease or a lifestyle choice. And then he asked ChatGPT to come up with a story, and then it spit out a 100-word essay on clinical obesity, and then citing the exact debate about that the editor wants to talk about. And then with another click to generate, for example, expand this story, and then it could generate 500 words to 800 words of story about obesity being a disease or a lifestyle choice. So it could basically provide you a feature article on this one.
Yes, but it doesn't tell you who the ideas are from, meaning that there's a lot of plagiarism in that output. See,
Mm-hmm.
because those ideas were not originally Chat GPT, but it created a piece that put those ideas together. So without, normally its output, it has no attribution.
Agree. No
So
citations. Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that in a way is kind of dishonest. It's different when you ask for it to summarize information and you know where it's from. And it's different when it's opinion, because even the opinion, you're not sure. I would never ask Chat GPT for an opinion piece, because opinion means values and it cannot do that. anything that has that's value laden should not be entrusted by an AI because they cannot measure it. So they will churn out what is the majority view that they can find, but that doesn't mean that it's the correct view.
Agree.
It's different when you're looking for facts that, for example, like I said, definitions of media theories. It can do that pretty well and pretty accurately. You have, with very little issue. But once you ask it for, that's why when, the ones who write stories attacking ChatGPT and saying that it's it's a bad tool, ganyan, and it's whatever horror stories they have about it. When you look through the article, what I find is because they ask it questions that you shouldn't be asking an AI, and opinion about things that, let's say, something emotional. Of course, it can't answer you correctly. It will generate perhaps what psychologists have said and have uploaded on the internet. But that's about as far as it can go.
Agree, Prof. Rachel. So we should know how ChatGPT works, and then by then, so we know what value it could give us. For example, just for providing us with information that could normally it's fact, and then because you're asking for a definition, you could double check and inquire whether it is actually correct, accurate or not. And for mechanical task also, and then of course in the end you should be able to you're the end user, and then you're going to edit it or put some value on the generated text.
Yeah.
So
even that, I would add that don't ask it for historical data either. Because precisely because there's a lot of historical distortion on the internet, you will get false information.
Agree, because it's trained on the internet, right? And then not everything on the internet is actually correct. So yeah, so if you're going to use perhaps ChatGPT, so be careful with the facts that it will give you. And then yeah, thanks, Prof. Next question. So how do you this one is for Maisa. How do you think these generative AI approaches affect the educational system of art studies, art history, and art studio practice, and later on for journalism? Let's see.
Generative AI approaches could potentially contribute in furthering learning avenues in studying art, in holding art historical and studio production classes, both traditional and digital. Even in the practice of art conservation, AI tools could potentially open learning avenues in recreating near-forgotten art historical masterpieces, allowing students and teachers the opportunity to critically analyze distinctive styles and techniques utilized in these artworks. It would be interesting to have AI generative systems developed for scholastic use, a secure one that would not put data at risk, and one that could be utilized to complement, broaden, and perhaps deepen students' understanding and engagement with design thinking and imaginative compositional rendering. For art museums and collectors, AI tools could potentially aid in detecting art forgeries, like in the case of an AI system created by Swiss company Art Recognition in 2021. Though their technology still has a lot of room for improvement, they did claim that it could detect forgeries with a 90% accuracy. They attempted to determine an artwork's authenticity by analyzing data based on its stylistic rendering attributes like brushwork style and technique, using a digital photographic representation. This process, though arguably suspect for traditional conservators, avoids direct contact with the artwork, lessening the risk of mishandling, and bypasses costly and energy-consuming traditional authentication methods like X-ray technology and microscopy, infrared reflectography. Besides being a visual medium, generative art has also found applications in other creative fields, such as in Michael Hans Mayer's computational architecture, that makes use of advances in computation and fabrication technologies to generate new spatial realities and sensibilities. Another art form produced through generative models is the characteristic ever-changing music produced by John Cage and Brian Eno, which basically revolves around the idea and process of making music by designing systems that produce the music.
Okay, so Maisa is quite positive about the potential use of generative AI in art studies, art history, and art studio practice as a tool to enhance and help open avenues and several opportunities in arts. So as long as the security of the model, and it could also be used for AI tools in detecting forgery. So basically a lot of positive use in educational system of art studies, history, and studio practice. In journalism, Prof, how do you think this generative AI approaches affect yung educational system of journalism?
At the moment, we can only see it from the positive point of view that we can use AI to enhance data journalism, and therefore have the potential to have news stories that can be generated actually without even leaving your desk, because of the possibility of, you know, the big the big data sourcing that can be done. In terms of writing, again, it really I don't think it can really write satisfactorily. I mean, it can generate news, but not in-depth reporting, not something that would answer all the needs of journalism. So you still need a journalist, for example, to go to the sources to ask the important questions, to do the field work. AI cannot do that for you. It's not
Prof,
going to take its place.
Prof, I think I'm pardon for the ignorance, no. So I'm not familiar with data journalism. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Data journalism is using data like statistics to generate news stories. No, for example, if it puts together several annual reports of agencies and asks it if you can, well, in the ideal world, because the recording system of this government is foreign, but in a more advanced nation, for example, you can get the annual reports of each department and then using AI generate data of, okay, how much was spent, let's say, on transportation, right? And then write a story on just that, on how much of taxpayers' money went to to transportation expense of government agencies, which would take you'd have to be analyzing hundreds of data sets
Agree.
manually if you were doing it yourself.
And an AI tool would help data journalists.
Yes, and not just journalists but researchers as well. So if everything was digitized and then it can be run through AI, then it's easier to generate the story. One of the uses right now that's in the newsroom is after the story is put together, then with the data, AI does the visualization for it. So again, yes, with myself, no, it's with the art. Normally you'd have an artist render the visualization, but AI, there are AI that can do that now, using the data sets that you input in it, so that shortcuts the work. So those are the things that it's being currently used for.
So speaking of shortcuts, so one major risk associated with ChatGPT and other generative models, since you have shortcuts, so it's plagiarism. So you mentioned this a while ago. So anyone may use tool to generate text or responses or arts so that are then passed off as their own work. So how can we avoid or discourage this situation in journalism, for example?
Well,
Mhm.
plagiarism is only plagiarism if you do not acknowledge the source. So for example, in art, even if it's an AI generated image, if the multiple sources from where it's been taken from, before it was put together is acknowledged, then that is not plagiarism,
Agree.
right? The same with text. If you can cite the sources, then that is not plagiarism. So it's only plagiarism when it's not your idea but you claim it as your own. So, and the danger with ChatGPT 3 is that it doesn't include sources. But as someone in the chat pointed out, if you use ChatGPT on Bing, then the Bing search engine uses the technology of ChatGPT, and so you have two AI working, and sources can be traced. So if you're using ChatGPT as the chat on Bing, because that's what it's just an integrated ChatGPT was just integrated into Bing, then sources can be traced and can be cited. One of the things that is nice about the chat on Bing is, for example, I'm looking through several journal articles. Now I'm looking for, to build my review of related literature. So I see on the search, I'm doing a search, and then I see a lot of, I'm looking for a particular material, let's say disinformation, since it's my favorite topic. So I see a lot of journal articles on this, and I can actually, instead of having to read through all of those articles, let's say, it generates 20 to 30 journal articles on the topic that I'm looking for, I can actually ask Bing, because of ChatGPT's, because of the integration, to summarize each of those journal articles for me. So that now I know which one will I actually read based on the summary that Bing had given me. Ito pala. Ito yung mas tugma, di ba? Dun sa hinahanap ko. Right? So this is more appropriate for what I'm looking for. So I'm going to read only this 10 instead of all this 30, now that I know what it's all about. Right? So those are the things that AI can do for you.
And do you picture, this one is a question from the audience, do you picture journalism courses at least 5 years from now, following the prevalence of these generative models, be somehow changed?
Of course, well, I cannot speak for all, but in my department, we're always trying to be one step ahead. So we usually integrate whatever's new into the curriculum. We have a catch-all course called seminar, where, before we go through the entire effort of a curriculum review, we test run the course in that catch-all 3 units, until we realize that it's something important, something that's something that should stay and something that should be permanent. And that's when we propose a subject in the University Council as a new course in journalism. So yes, it will come in, maybe right now just as a focus, and then later on integrated in all the other courses as AI develops.
Thank you. Let's hear
We
from.
actually have a course on data journalism at the moment. So we're using the non-generative AI already.
Actually, it's a good model, no, in your department. Perhaps I could also introduce that in your department. So these are catch-all course, so such that if you want to test out some elective courses, perhaps, and then we could use that as the topic or for that catch-all course that you want to introduce potentially in the future. Thanks for that idea, Prof. Rachel. No? So let's hear from Maisa about his perspective on plagiarism, possibly of generative models. Wait. Uh-huh.
Generative AI approaches could
Um, okay.
Artists have always drawn influence from works and thinking processes of other artists and used them as reference to further their own artistic pursuits. Artists learn from art's long and diverse histories and personalities. Of course, this practice only works on the premise that artists respectfully acknowledge these influences. The artistic process of appropriation should be done ethically and legally. Otherwise, without acquiring consent or according proper attribution, that would simply be distasteful theory. Generative AI is a collaborative process between humans and machines. Though engaged in what most people refer to as prompt-based art, users essentially direct AIs using prompts to render art. They do not render the actual drawing or painting processes involved in creating the artwork. As such, this creates questions of authorship when an AI-generated artwork is published, but not properly disclosed to be AI-generated. It is then deemed important to properly label AI-generated art, similar to identifying the artistic medium and process used in both traditional and digital artworks. This act is akin to citing your references when submitting academic papers. It shows that we acknowledge where our realizations are drawn from, and also provides future readers or artists an opportunity to learn from engaging the same resources. In Sasha Brodsky's article in LifeWire, she noted how researchers at the University of Chicago created a software called Glaze to keep AI models from learning a particular artist style. It is a relevant contribution to a growing effort to prevent AI art from including the work of human artists without proper attribution. Alternatively, artists could also incorporate digital watermarks in their work to make it harder for AI models to replicate. And they could also choose to use low-resolution images of their work online or create different versions of their artwork and that are not easily reproduced by an AI system.
So to summarize also, similar to what we discussed in journalism, so as long as we acknowledge the inspiration, because it's inevitable, arts normally, as mentioned by Maisa, is inspired by others, learn from personal experiences or from personalities. So as long as they acknowledge the inspiration, it should not be or you're safe with plagiarism. So, but AI generated arts kasi should be disclosed or yung AI generated arts should be disclosed. So, yung practice of citing or acknowledging the inspiration or indicating whether it is AI generated or not is similar to what we do in technical papers, which is citing our references. So on the flip side, so if you are the artist, so you can protect yourselves din naman by including watermarks as mentioned by Maisa, or lowering the resolution of the digital copies of your arts. So that's it. So with these dangers, so should there be policies in using generative AI in terms of intellectual property? I'm not sure if she has answer on this one. Let me check. So this one is about intellectual property. Prof. Rachel, I'm not sure if this one is also related to journalism. Is there something like intellectual property or perhaps copyrights on perhaps a literary article?
For books, yes.
Mm-hmm.
For a normal news article, of course not. No. So yeah. So unless it's already a publication like a journal or a book, then it has copyright.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. For generative AI arts, this one is particularly on arts. So let's hear.
Intellectual property regimes Intellectual property regimes were created to encourage human creativity and production. Until recently, such creativity and innovation were one of the defining traits of the human species. For most legal institutions, it remains unconfirmed whether they would allow an AI to possess the intellectual property rights to the things it creates. The Federal Court of Australia reversed its previous position on AI-created inventions in its decision, ruling that Dabus, an AI system capable of proposing various ideas and inventions, can be considered the official inventor of its patentable inventions, while its developer, Dr. Stephen Fowler, remains the patent owner. As a result, for the first time in history, a court has determined that an AI-based program can be regarded as an inventor under patent law. In contrast, the UK Court of Appeals recently dismissed Dr. Fowler's patent application on behalf of Davis, holding that artificial intelligence has no rights and cannot be included as an inventor on a patent application because an inventor must be a person under the Patents Act of 1977. However, at present, no decision has been made on artificial intelligence and intellectual property rights. Concerning art production, creating art or any other material through artificial intelligence carries its own risks, since not many countries have set IP protection policies for AI-generated art. So until we can clearly define AI generators' nature, structure, and boundaries, not to mention what should count as a crime and who should be held liable for specific violations, there would be no legal or official safeguards for artists or for AIs.
Okay. Yeah. Last. Guys, if you have questions for Prof. Rachel, so we can entertain perhaps 2 to 3 questions. So we're down to, I think, last 2 questions on this one. So basically, we're discussing about the ethical considerations. No. So Prof. Rachel, so what ethical considerations should journalists keep in mind when working with ChatGPT or other automated systems, and how can they ensure that these systems are used in a responsible and transparent manner?
I think if one keeps in mind that it is a tool and that it's an assistant more than a creator, then you wouldn't find yourself into trouble. And also to be aware that the facts have to be double checked. Anything you get from ChatGPT, especially when it's with regarding events or historical data, needs to be fact checked, not to take it as is, because there's a lot of error. In fact, in some cases, as much as 40-45% error. So yeah, one needs to be careful so that you don't become the spreader of fake news without realizing it. I think that's the most important thing. And the second is the citation of sources. No? So again, that's why I don't see it as it shouldn't be as the author itself, because right now it doesn't tell you where the sources, where the data is coming from. So yeah, so maybe the higher models or even the chat on Bing will be better for that use, no, because you can trace the sources.
Yeah. And yeah, actually, sometimes I use ChatGPT for mechanical repeatable task. For example, replying to an email with very generic reply. For example, an invitation and then you cannot attend. So sometimes I as an assistant rather than your master, which is the ChatGPT. So I call it the EA or executive assistant. So just sharing my experience with EA. So we have a question here. The danger of becoming too dependent on AI, like ChatGPT, might lead to laziness. Agree on this one. So as people increasingly rely on AI for information, decision making, and problem solving, there is a risk that they may lose critical thinking skills, creativity, and self-reliance. So how can we best take precaution to prevent this, Prof?
Well, I think it's really up to the person. If they want to rely on AI, then they are the most likely the persons who will be replaced by AI, because they cannot generate their own ideas or work without it.
Agree.
It's the persons who, because AI, to be used properly, you know what the prompt is. You know, actually, if it's giving you BS, you'll be able to detect it without even having to fact check. So yeah, so you can end up, yes, being lazy and making it do your work, but there's a cliff. There's a cliff that you're gonna fall off eventually. So yeah.
Sorry for the unstable connection, Prof. Continue.
So like I said, if you're too dependent on AI, you're gonna one day find yourself falling off a cliff, and you wouldn't know how to get out because
Agree.
you didn't develop your own skill set.
Agree. Yeah, tama, Prof. And then another question, Prof. Good afternoon po. Ask ko lang, what is the ethical considerations that should we do when you want to apply or pursue as a journalism and consider as a journalism to avoid the unbiased information or new topic that we write as a journalism? Perhaps she's asking for the ethical considerations when the person wants to pursue a career in journalism.
Well, one of the things that is important in any journalistic work is that there is a multiple sourcing, right? You're not getting information just one source. Otherwise, it will really be biased. And the thing about it, the current iteration of ChatGPT is you don't know from where it's getting its information. So it could be just based on one, because it's a pre-trained, right? So it is actually pre-trained to only search particular segments of society. So there is already an integrated bias from the developers of the AI. So this, which is why you can't really depend on it 100%. Right? That's what I'm saying, that its margin of error is very big. So if you want to, if you really want to be a journalist, the first thing you have to do is to know where to look for your sources, to be able to go on field, to develop your interview skills, and use ChatGPT for background maybe, or to generate ideas on story ideas maybe. Then it's perfectly legit. Like you want to do a feature about, let's say, Luneta Park, and you don't know, instead of, you can use it as your teammate for brainstorming. That's how I see it. Then you might find an idea that actually works for you. So something like that.
Last question, to sum up everything, Prof. How can AI in general, not necessarily generative models, change the future of the journalism as a profession?
Well, it will mean that the journalists have to be more skilled. The skill set that you had if you were a journalist in the 80s, you would need to major upgrade, to be able to adapt to the new forms of journalism. With AI, a lot of the work is, yes, unfortunately can be replaced, no? Especially, for example, if you're just used to the 5 W's and H, no? Then yes, that's replaceable. So
Mhm.
you'd have to learn how to dig deeper, analyze, look for data, use big data.
Mhm.
You'd have to upgrade your computer skills. If you were a business reporter, I was just talking to a few business reporters a month ago, and one of the things that they will actually really need to have more background in economics and business. They can't rely on just knowledge that they gained from college, but they would have to upgrade also those the business knowledge,
Mhm.
the technical knowledge, in order to be able to be more analytical. Otherwise, if they're just reporting the basics, then they will be left behind.
Mhm. So the future journalists should be able to know how to, well, basically handle big data, to be computer literate, and to be more analytical, should be adaptable to, I mean, a specific domain wherein they want to focus on, for example, yung business as mentioned, no, Prof. Rachel. So anyway, I think that would be all. No questions from our audience. By the way, Prof, our audience are, most of them are actually our computer students, and some are from different colleges of the LSU. So thank you very much for sharing your ideas.
Although
And
I see a few colleagues from abroad and from other institutions as well.
okay. Hello po. Sorry, yeah, sorry for missing those people there. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Prof. Rachel. And then hopefully ma-invite uli namin kayo in other future events. To all of you guys, I'll try to give you the link to the recordings in case meron kayong na missed out in our discussion. Yeah, and then see you on the third session of ChatGPT discussion series.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Could we have
Yes, yes, Doc Rachel.
a photo op with the audience?
Yes, please. Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, yung mga ganyung let's have a photo. If you
Yeah.
have,
Can you turn off your screen so that more people can fit in the gallery?
wait, stop sharing, and then let's see. Hold on. Huh?
My screen is frozen.
Wait lang. I'll stop the recording now. Do you want to stop? Yes, you receive an email. Yes.